Do you know what throwing away your shot means? Because clearly Alexander Hamilton didn't. To throw away your shot means that you're going to shoot at your opposing duelist's feet, not in the air, Alexander. And we're here today at the Weehawken Dueling Grounds, where over 18 duels were actually fought here in New Jersey. I'm Lesley Schierenbeck, the History Chick. On today's episode, we're going to be debunking some Hamilton myths for you, so let's go. First Presbyterian Church Cemetery in Elizabeth, New Jersey. Originally, during Hamilton's time, Elizabeth was called Elizabethtown, and we have two kind of tying pieces of Hamiltonian knowledge and trivia for you here. So the first is, if you look to my left, you'll notice a building that is the Snyder Academy. This is where Hamilton came to study and prepare for college. Now, as we know, Hamilton wanted to attend Princeton University, at the time known as the College of New Jersey, on an accelerated track, but was denied, and so therefore he went to King's College, which is the modern-day Columbia University in New York. But it was at the Snyder Academy, which was built in the 1680s, that Hamilton and an older student, Aaron Burr, both attended. Now, it's doubtful whether the two would have met each other in school, since Burr was a little bit older, but nonetheless, another piece of Hamiltonian trivia here in Elizabeth, New Jersey. In addition to that, behind me is a very famous figure of the American Revolution that Hamilton and Washington both came into contact with, and that is of the Reverend James Caldwell. Caldwell was known as the fighting chaplain, or the fighting parishioner, and he was in charge of a church. His wife, actually, who is buried behind, Margaret Caldwell, she was killed at the Battle of Connecticut Farm. She was shot through a window or a wall, leaving her 9 children with her husband. Now, sadly, Caldwell died a year later after his wife, after a sentry, murdered him. That sentry was brought to trial and was supposedly hung. However, it still goes to show you that things were very tenuous here in the Revolution in the 1780s in New Jersey. So that left Caldwell's 9 children to be orphaned. The towns of New Jersey are all named after Caldwell, and the interesting part about this cemetery is that it dates back to 1687, with over 23 graves of commissioned officers that served here in the American Revolution. If you really want to know the room where it happened, it was behind me, where a young Alexander Hamilton was girl crazy and brimming with libido, a direct quote, in which he and Betsy, Schuyler, would meet in this front parlor, and after a month of supervised visits would become engaged. Now, how did the two actually get hooked up? Well, it was because of Betsy's aunt, whose husband was Dr. John Cochrane, was quartered here, and he was the personal doctor to George Washington. And so, with a little matchmaking help from her aunt, she would secure her man and their marriage. Hamilton was often referred to as Washington's right-hand man. As part of the honor, Alexander would often receive quartering privileges alongside Washington, and it was in these historic homes where Hamilton would beg his boss for his own command. Here in Morristown, New Jersey in 1780, Hamilton and Washington encamped. In particular, they were close to the Passaic Falls for its strategic position and accessibility to food and forage. Shown here is Washington's headquarters at the Dye Mansion. Before we talk about where Washington and Hamilton spent their winter of 1779 to 1780, I want to draw your attention to this museum behind me. So this museum, which is the Morristown National Historical Park, was established in the 1930s as part of Franklin Roosevelt's Works Progress Administration. During the Great Depression, Roosevelt, under his first and second New Deals, allocated money so that people, historians, writers, and artists actually were able to preserve parts of our nation's history. And so this building, which was completed in 1937, actually mimics George Washington's house in Mount Vernon. So there's a little piece of Virginia here in Jersey. This Georgian-styled home, formerly Jacob Ford Jr.'s, was Washington's headquarters in 1779 to 1780. This is where Hamilton kept pressing and pressing George Washington if he could have a military command. In fact, one of the treasures that's inside the museum states a letter in which Hamilton writes his father-in-law complaining about his boss. Some things in the working world never change. Excuse me, sir. Did you know that when you're in Morristown, New Jersey, you should definitely check out the Green, because you can get an awesome selfie with this shot. So we have George Washington, Alexander Hamilton, who we've been following today, and of course, everyone give it up for America's favorite fighting Frenchman, the Marquis de Lafayette. It was here in Morristown that Lafayette actually lets Washington and Colonel Hamilton know that the French are on their way to help save the cause of the American Revolution. Well, we finally made it to the Weehawken Dueling Grounds, where on the fateful morning of July 11th, 1804, Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr met each other just about 20 yards down from this spot at 7 a.m., guns drawn. Now, we're only about an hour off of time, but we're going to tell you a little bit about why Weehawken, New Jersey, and why dueling. So, Lin-Manuel Miranda, not everything is legal in Jersey. In fact, dueling was illegal here, but New Jersey was a little bit lackadaisical on enforcing the law, which is why over 18 duels were actually fought on this site for over a century, from the 1700s and into the 1800s. The reason why this spot was picked in particular is because it made it very difficult to get to, and you would actually be able to see any authorities that were coming into the area. So where Hamilton and Burr actually dueled is about 20 feet below us on the basalt cliffs. Now, this land has changed over time as a railroad came through in the 1870s that would eradicate the area of dueling. But if they dueled here, you actually would be able to see authorities if they came over from New York, and you would also be able to see the authorities if they came down from the top, which is why they chose this spot. When Burr and Hamilton met here in 1804, they came with their seconds and a doctor, but in order to keep it as secretive and legal as possible, they actually utilized separate boats for everything. The pistols that they had came in separate boats, the seconds came in separate boats, and any peoples that were associated with the duel came in second boats as well. When Hamilton and Burr finally face off, they take 10 paces and fire. Hamilton gets to shoot first, since they had drawn as to who was shooting. Hamilton throws away his shot infamously by shooting into the air, not at the feet, which is the way you normally do it, and Burr shoots at Hamilton, killing him, mortally wounding him, where he will be taken in a boat across the Hudson back and perishes the next day. That leaves Burr, a vice president with murder charges that will eventually be eradicated from his criminal history, but leaves Weehawken the site of a duel. Now, the only thing left remaining, which geologists can attest to, is the rock that is behind this statue. Now, the infamousness about this rock is that supposedly after Hamilton was hit, he lays against the rock while waiting for the doctor. Nobody can confirm nor deny that. And the irony of all ironies is this is also the site where Hamilton's son Philip dies in a duel defending his father's honor. Next up, we're going to take a look and see what Hamilton envisioned for America as we wrap up our Hamilton tour of New Jersey. On a hot summer day, three friends met here for a picnic: Alexander Hamilton, George Washington, and the Marquis de Lafayette. It was after the Battle of Monmouth. They were looking for a place of respite, and so the Totowa Falls were suggested as a scenic overlook. And it was here at these 77-foot falls that only Niagara surpasses on the East Coast that Hamilton comes up with an ingenious idea amidst his lunch of ham and tongue and biscuit sandwiches, as well as a little bit of grog. You see, he wants to take the water power that's harnessed in the Patterson Falls and utilize it as a way to start a truly industrial city. And he has that hope for Patterson, New Jersey. The reason why he wants an industrial city? Because he feels that America is too much reliant upon foreign products from outside nations and that we should harvest our own goods here. Now, Hamilton wouldn't be alive to see that dream come true, but if you come here to Patterson, New Jersey, you can see the remnants of what once was. So we have a remaining building here that was built in 1914 that was known as the Society of Useful Manufacturers. That was the company and the established area that Hamilton wanted to have for America. That building still harnesses electric power today. In the 1900s and in the 1800s, that building was used as a system of waterways to harness the two huge factories that were here: Samuel Colt's Revolver and Patterson Silk City. So while Hamilton might not have lived to see this dream, there are still remnants of it here in New Jersey. And thanks for watching this episode of The History Chick. I'm Lesley Schierenbeck. Stay tuned for our next episode. Did you know that George Washington loved to dance? I feel like I would have been like a solid dancing partner. He was also tall, so come at me, George. From a historical Je m'appelle Lesley. Ne me touche pas couchante. History pet peeve, it's Washington, not Warshington. There's no R in it. As a historian, I find it very interesting that a little Broadway play brought Hamilton into national celebrity. In fact, I've always considered him to be one of the most underrated and unsung heroes of the American Revolution. Think about it. He grew up on an impoverished Caribbean island. All of his family passed away even before he was a teenager. But with hard work and dedication, he makes it to America and has a career that spans over 22 years as Washington's right-hand man, first Secretary of the Treasury, and truly embodies the American dream. So cheers to you, Hamilton.